Yo, what's up, everybody? Andrew Mahone here with Tricky Jim. Today, we're going to be talking about the best cards from the newest Pokemon trading card game set, Stellar Crown. The set releases this week and comes out on the Pokemon Trading Card Game Live September 12th. So I'm going to be talking about the best cards and which ones you should play and which ones you should probably leave in your binder. I know my stream schedule has been a little bit wacky the past week or so, and that's because Natalie and I just welcomed a new addition to our family, our first baby boy to the world just last weekend, and we are very excited about that, but it will impact my content schedule just a little bit as we get settled into our new roles as parents, so do be patient with me while I get my new groove figured out. But I am very thrilled to now be a dad, and thank you all for the well wishes and support as Natalie and I go through this. I'm excited to get to the card reviews today, but before we do, let's hear a quick word from my sponsor, Full Grip Games. FullGripGames.com is the best place to buy Pokemon trading card game singles and sealed product. We've got super fast shipping and top-of-the-line grading. You really won't find better service anywhere than at FullGripGames.com. Full Grip also has a buy list, so if you've got too many Pokemon cards like I do, and you want to turn them into cash or store credit, then make sure to check out Full Grip Games' buy list. Full Grip is always buying bulk and singles, and selling your extra cards to Full Grip Games directly supports the content that I create here on Tricky Jim. If you're looking for the newest Pokemon cards, make sure to check out our Stellar Crown singles available now, or pre-orders for the upcoming set, Surging Sparks sealed product. Thank you so much for buying and selling at FullGripGames.com. Now, let's get to the set review. Ledian is one of the 4 pre-release promos from Stellar Crown. Its ability allows you to switch in one of your opponent's benched Pokemon with 90 hit points or less to the active spot when you evolve Ledian from your hand. This ability is okay. You can gust up low HP targets or maybe bigger targets that you haven't quite finished off to knock them out with a stronger attacker, as Ledian is not a great attacker itself. This ability is a watered down version of Bright Look, which is an ability that was featured on Luxray G Level X and Ninetales from Dragons Exalted. Ledian does have free retreat as well, which is nice, but ultimately, there are many other ways to bring your opponent's Pokemon into the active spot in standard format right now, like Counter Catcher, Prime Catcher, and Boss's Orders, so I don't expect Ledian to see any real play. Hydrapple EX is a huge 330 hit point Stage 2 grass Pokemon, and I'm very excited to see Diplin finally get an evolution. Hydrapple is undoubtedly a very cool Pokemon, and it's got a great ability and attack as well. Ripe Charge allows you to attach a basic grass energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon once during your turn, and then heal 30 damage from that Pokemon. Its attack, Syrup Storm, does 30 damage, plus 30 more damage for each grass energy attached to all of your Pokemon. And obviously, Hydrapple EX pairs very well with Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, which also accelerates grass energy into play with its Teal Dance ability. Teal Dance combined with Ripe Charge can allow you to flood the board with grass energy and launch massive attacks with Syrup Storm. That's all well and good, but in standard format right now, we are experiencing a very turbo style of play where games are often being won in 3 to 4 turns, having to evolve a Stage 2 Pokemon into play in order to trade evenly with other hyper-fast decks is not the most sustainable strategy, especially when you have lots of hand disruption in the format as well. I don't know that Hydrapple EX is really bringing anything to the table to outpace other top standard decks at the moment, but Hydrapple EX is a really cool addition to the Teal Mask Ogerpon EX engine. The thing about being a Stage 2 Fire-type Pokemon EX is that you're never going to be able to avoid getting compared to Charizard EX. Charizard EX is not Fire-type per se, but it does take Fire energy and is kind of the gold standard as far as attacking Stage 2 Pokemon in standard format. And by gold standard, I mean it's really the only attacking Stage 2 Pokemon that exists in standard format right now. Gardevoir EX is more of a supporting role Stage 2 Pokemon, though it does get in there and attack sometimes. But really, those two are the only two, and the common denominator with both of them is that they both accelerate energy to themselves. So if you do jump through all of the hoops that you need to in order to get Charizard EX or Gardevoir EX into play, then at least you'll be able to attack quickly and easily. Cinderace EX does not accelerate energy to itself, and its attacks are pretty expensive. Flare Strike does 280 damage for a fire and 2 colorless energy, with the drawback being during your next turn, this Pokemon can't use Flare Strike. Its Garnet Volley attack costs a fire, a fighting, and a darkness energy, and does 180 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Cinderace EX has 320 hit points and free retreat. The free retreat is really nice for Flare Strike, since Flare Strike does have the drawback that you can't use it back-to-back turns, so Cinderace EX will need to go back to the bench in order to reset that downside. If you're playing Cinderace EX with Pidgeot EX, then you can easily pivot Cinderace EX in and out of the active spot, as both Cinderace EX and Pidgeot EX have free retreat. Another neat thing is that Cinderace EX is compatible with Featherball, which can easily search out Cinderace EX for free, and Pidgeot EX for free, since both of them have free retreat. The major issue with Cinderace EX based decks is that they're just a little bit too slow in the current standard metagame. They take time to set up, but then you also need to figure out a way to accelerate energy to them. My favorite way to accelerate energy onto Cinderace EX is to use Magma Basin in combination with Neo Upper Energy or Double Turbo Energy to pay for Cinderace EX's attacks. But you could also use the new supporter Crispin, which can accelerate an extra energy into play as well. In the games that I've tested with Cinderace EX, I've just found that you have to take a turn to set up, and then you can take a turn to play Crispin, and by that point, many decks have already taken half of their prize cards by taking out your support Pokemon like Rotom V or Lumineon or something like that. It's just tough to be a Stage 2 Pokemon in standard format right now, and I'm not sure that Cinderace EX really makes the cut. Lapras EX was awesome in the pre-release that I played with Heather on stream, as it's a 220 hit point basic Pokemon with the Power Splash attack, which just does 40 damage for each energy attached to this Pokemon. In a limited format, attaching energy to a big Pokemon EX and then swinging for 120 to 160 damage is really good, but this attack is not quite as powerful in standard format. Lapras EX has to compete with sluggers like Chien-Pao EX in Baxcalibur-based decks. Chien-Pao EX has a multiplier of 60 times instead of 40 times, though Chien-Pao EX does have to discard all energy attached to it in order to use its attack. It still takes less energy and has the Shivery Chill ability, which allows it to go search out the energy it needs to attack. So Chien-Pao is just a far superior card, as it finds the energy and has a higher multiplier. Lapras EX does have the Larimar Rain attack, which costs a water, a psychic, and a metal energy, and allows you to look at the top 20 cards of your deck. That's right, 20 cards. And you're allowed to look at those 20 cards and attach as many energy cards you find there to your Pokemon in any way you like, and shuffle the other cards back into your deck. This is a very silly attack. I'm sure you will end up seeing some silly YouTube videos utilizing this attack, but It is not competitively viable in any sense. I do not think that this card will see play at any serious tournaments. Both Crabominable and Veluza have the ready-to-cook abilities, which make it so that their attacks cost 1 colorless less for each Kofu in your discard pile. Now, Kofu is a pretty mediocre supporter. You have to put 2 cards from your hand onto the bottom of your deck, and then you can draw 4 cards. It's fine. Not the kind of supporter that you would probably play if you had your choice, but they do make it so that Crabominable and Veluza can attack for cheap. So you would definitely play Kofu in these decks. Now, Crabominable has a huge attack. Haymaker does 250 damage for just 1 water energy, with the drawback being this Pokemon cannot use Haymaker during your next turn. 250 damage for 1 energy on a single prize Pokemon is great. But in order to actually use Haymaker for just 1 water energy, you do have to have 4 Kofu in your discard pile, which means that you need to find them, then discard them, and you can't have prized any, or you're going to have to pay an extra energy in order to use Crabominable's attack. You could pay for Crabominable's attack with maybe a reversal energy, but in order to do that, you have to be losing the game, and you still have to have a pair of Kofu in the discard pile in order to attack with a reversal energy. Ultimately, I think that this Crabominable and Veluza deck with Kofu is purely a gimmick and not really competitively viable. It's kind of a tough time to be a single prize attacking deck in standard format right now, especially with cards like Iron Hands EX running rampant and taking bonus prizes. And then, of course, there's the new supporter, Briar, which allows Terra Pokemon to take bonus prizes when they take knockouts. I don't really see this engine as being anywhere near stable enough to be able to compete in the hyper-aggressive standard formats. Dreadnought has 140 hit... Actually, no, this card's terrible. I'm just kidding. Joltik is just a little guy. It's got 30 hit points, but an interesting attack. Battery charge costs 1 colorless energy and allows you to search your deck for up to 2 basic grass energy and up to 2 basic lightning energy and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. This is an incredibly explosive start to any game. Loading 4 extra energy into play is phenomenal. And Joltik can be used to power up Galvantula EX, which is actually a pretty good attacker. It's got 260 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Charged Web, does 110 damage plus 110 more damage if the defending Pokemon is a Pokemon EX or Pokemon V. That's a 2 energy attack that can do 220 damage, which 1-hit KOs most basic Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. Some outliers have 230 hit points or 240 hit points, but knocking out most of them for just 2 energy is pretty dang good. And then Fulgurite costs a grass, a lightning, and a fighting energy and does 180 damage. You have to discard all energy from this Pokemon, but during your opponent's next turn, they can't play any item cards from their hand. So 180 damage item lock, that is a very potent attack, being able to knock out Pokemon like Squawkabilly EX or Mew EX while also denying your opponent items for the following turn can absolutely sway the course of a game. I don't know that Galvantula EX will be a meta staple, but the attacks on this Pokemon are at least interesting. 180 damage with item lock is nothing to overlook. Dachsbun EX is a Stage 1 Pokemon EX with 250 hit points and the full mealtime ability, which says once during your turn, when you play this card from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may heal all damage from each of your evolution Pokemon. If you do, you have to discard all energy from each Pokemon you healed in this way. This may sound very familiar, and that's because it is. We just had the supporter Cheryl that was legal this past rotation, and Cheryl was a supporter card that essentially did the same thing. There's even the trainer card Pokemon Center from the Pokemon TCG's base sets, which also does a similar effect, except is not limited to evolution Pokemon. I don't know that Dachsbun EX will be worth playing to heal your evolution Pokemon when other cards like Professor Turo's Scenario exist or Penny, right? And those cards just kind of seem more useful as they can double as switch cards and take up less deck space, as Dachsbun EX does have to actually evolve from Fido in order to be used. I don't really expect Dachsbun to be seeing any play, unfortunately. Medicham EX has 260 hit points and the Yoga Kick attack, which does 190 damage and isn't affected by any weakness or resistance. 3 energy for 190. That is not cutting it on a Stage 1 Pokemon EX. And then the Chi-Atsu attack costs 2 colorless energy and allows you to put damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon until its remaining hit points is 50. These kinds of attacks are pretty much never good in the Pokemon TCG. We've already got Serena EX, which already isn't seeing any competitive play, and Serena EX is better than Medicham EX. So if you want to go for this kind of gimmicky strategy, just stick with Serena EX. The new Klingklang has the emergency spin ability, which says if your opponent has a Stage 2 Pokemon in play, you can just put Klingklang from your hand directly onto your bench. That's pretty cool. I mean, in the current state of the Pokemon TCG, evolving is kind of cringe. They've really boosted big basics and Pokemon VSTAR and stuff like that. Evolving Stage 2 Pokemon into play has become way too much work to be competitively viable. So anytime I can just cheat a Stage 2 Pokemon into play, wow, that feels great. Now, Klingklang's attack is not that good. Hypersonic Beam does 130 damage for 2 colorless energy, and you have to discard all energy from this Pokemon in order to use the attack. The one use case for Klingklang that I can think of is that if you're up against a Chien-Pao EX Baxcalibur deck, and you want to be able to knock out Chien-Pao EX for just 1 double turbo energy, Klingklang can do that. You can use Emergency Spin to get Klingklang into play since your opponent will have a Baxcalibur on their bench inevitably, and then you can attach a double turbo to Klingklang and use Hypersonic Beam for 110 damage after the double turbo damage reduction times 2 because of Chien-Pao's weakness, and blammo, you've got a one-hit KO. That is a very, very narrow use case for Klingklang, but the use case does exist. This Melmetal is pretty cool. It's got 160 hit points and the Remodel Axe attack, which costs a metal and 2 colorless energy. It does 250 damage, and before dealing damage, you have to discard a tool card from this Pokemon. If you can't, the attack does nothing. I don't really see this attack being useful in standard format, but in Gym Leader Challenge format, this is a very potent attack. 250 damage clears almost everything in the format, and you can combo Remodel Axe with U-Turn Board, a tool card that automatically gets returned to your hand when you discard it from play, in order to use the attack over and over again without actually having to get rid of a tool card. Melmetal is certainly a viable option in Gym Leader Challenge format, and if you're unfamiliar, Gym Leader Challenge format's my favorite way to play Pokemon cards. You can read all about it at gymleaderchallenge.com. It's kind of like Pokemon TCG's Commander format. It's a singleton format where you can only play one type of Pokemon in your deck, kind of like a gym leader might. And then there's also no rule box Pokemon allowed to be played, so no Pokemon EX or anything like that, which makes it a lot of fun, in my opinion. Melmetal could be an all-star for metal decks in GLC. I love a thematic Pokemon, and Archaludon is, if nothing else, extremely thematic. It's got 180 hit points and the Steel Bridge ability. Get it? Because it's a bridge. The Pokemon is a bridge. The Steel Bridge ability makes it so that your Pokemon with metal energy attached to them have no retreat cost. Get it? Because, Archaludon is a bridge, so it helps people get from one place to the other, and then decreasing their retreat cost. That's kind of like helping the Pokemon get from one place to the other more easily. Its Iron Blaster attack costs 2 metal and a colorless energy and does 160 damage. I don't really see this card seeing any play, but it's kind of neat. Orthworm EX. is a 220 hit point basic metal Pokemon. It's a worm with arms, okay? Look at those arms go. It's got the Kerplow. It's got the Kerplow return attack, which says when this Pokemon is damaged by an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, even if this Pokemon is knocked out, put 2 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon for each metal energy attached to this Pokemon. Earthworm's attack, Rock Tomb, costs 4 colorless energy and does 150 damage, with the added bonus that during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon cannot retreat. You could play Earthworm EX with Metang and its Metal Maker ability to help load tons of energy onto your Earthworm EX and then laugh maniacally at your opponent while they swing into your Earthworm, telling them to stop hitting themselves as they get hit with your Kerplow return ability. Unfortunately, this is not a competitively viable strategy, though funny in a way, not actually good. You're much better off pairing Metal Maker with Dialga VSTAR, a real, proper metal Pokemon that does a lot more than 150 damage and can take bonus turns. Earthworm EX is kind of just a waste of space in those decks, unfortunately. Oh God, finally, we are on to the good stuff. If you haven't noticed by now, pretty much every card in this set is bad unless it has to do with Terra Pokemon, Terapagos EX, or colorless Pokemon. The colorless package in this set is absolutely insane, and it all starts with Noctowl. Noctowl has the Jewel Seeker ability, which says when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, if you have any Terra Pokemon in play, you may search your deck for up to 2 trainer cards and put them into your hand. That's right, folks. Shady Dealings is back in bird form on a Stage 1 Pokemon, but you have to have a Terra Pokemon in play in order to use the Jewel Seeker ability. So obviously Noctowl will pair very well with Terra Pokemon, especially basic Terra Pokemon, as they are the easiest Terra Pokemon to get into play. So low to the ground, efficient, basic Terra Pokemon will absolutely be the best partners for Noctowl, as they have the lowest barrier to access the absolutely insane Jewel Seeker ability. I don't know if you were worried about setting up your Noctowl, but just in case you were, the Pokemon Company decided to print this completely broken Fan Rotom. This Fan Rotom may only have 70 hit points, but it is a total game changer. It's got the Fan Call ability, which you can only use on the first turn of the game. I absolutely loathe this style of game design, by the way. Just limiting cards and effects and things like that to turn 1 only just makes things so hyper aggressive, and I really hate it. But anyways, this ability can only be used on the first turn of the game, and you get to search your deck for 3 colorless Pokemon with 100 hit points or less and put them into your hand. And guess what? Both Noctowl and Hoot have less than 100 hit points and are colorless Pokemon. So on the first turn of the game, you can use Buddy Poffin or Nest Ball or whatever to go get a Fan Rotom, then use Fan Call to go get 2 Hoot and a Noctowl for the following turn, and then you're ready to start using Jewel Seeker to go get whatever trainer cards you want out of your deck into your hand to go do whatever you want. It's just absolutely broken. Fan Rotom's also got a great attack. Assault Landing does 70 damage for 1 colorless energy, and if there isn't a stadium card in play, this attack fails. But that's all good because Fan Rotom is going to be getting paired with the new Area 0 Underdepths Stadium, so you'll often have that stadium to put into play to be able to use Assault Landing on the first turn of the game going second, and 70 damage is enough to knock out almost all evolving basics like Ralts and Charmander and all those little guys. But wait, there's more! Bouffalant is also a colorless Pokemon with 100 HP or less, with the Curly Wall ability, which says if you have another Bouffalant in play, all of your basic colorless Pokemon take 60 less damage from attacks done by your opponent's Pokemon. That's right, you get to reduce the damage done to your basic colorless Pokemon by 60, and all you need is 2 Bouffalant in play, and you can easily search for your Bouffalant with Rotom's Fan Call ability. This is a really ridiculously strong ability, as it makes it very difficult for your opponent to take knockouts. I mean, for instance, if you've got 2 Bouffalant in play and your opponent wants to knock out a bigger basic colorless Pokemon like the new Terapagos EX, they're going to need to do upwards of nearly 300 damage. Speaking of Terapagos EX, let's just get into it. This is the best attacker from the set. Terapagos EX has 230 hit points. It's a Terra Pokemon, so it works with all of the Noctowl and the Area 0 Underdepths stuff. It also works with Bouffalant, and it's got a very, very efficient first attack. Unified Beatdown costs 2 colorless energy and does 30 damage for each of your own benched Pokemon. And you can't use it on the first turn of the game going second. That kind of seems like a funny nerf to put on Terapagos EX as the game designers continue to ramp up the speed and aggression of the format. They're like, we'll throw you a bone, and at least you can't use Terapagos' attack on the first turn of the game going second. But everything else that they're doing in the format is just speeding up the pace of the game. That is a small nerf to an otherwise totally busted card. Now, it might not seem good at first, as Unified Beatdown only does 150 damage if you have a full bench of 5. But throughout this review, I have been referring to the new Area 0 Underdepths Stadium, which is printed pretty much precisely for Terapagos EX. Area 0 Underdepths makes it so that if a player has a Terra Pokemon in play, that player can have 8 benched Pokemon on their bench. So we have broken open the benches again. Benches can now be up to 8 Pokemon deep if you have a Terra Pokemon in play, which means that Terapagos EX can do up to 240 damage with its Unified Beatdown attack if you have a full bench of 8. And Unified Beatdown costs 2 colorless energy, so that means you can pay for it with just 1 double turbo energy, which does decrease the amount of damage that Unified Beatdown does, but still 1 energy for 220 damage on a basic Pokemon that might be taking 60 less damage because of Bouffalant's Curly Wall ability, that also has easy access to one of the most broken new consistency engines in the game, and it's easy to see how Terapagos EX is getting a lot of hype. Terapagos EX also has a second attack. Crown Opal costs a grass, a water, and a lightning energy, and it does 180 damage, with the added effect that during your opponent's next turn, you get to prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from basic, non-colorless Pokemon. So if you're up against a Raging Bolt EX deck, you could use Crown Opal to wall off that deck almost entirely. I mean, that could be very strong, but Raging Bolt EX decks do tend to play cards like Prime Catcher and Iron Bundle, which could push Terapagos EX out of the active spot and allow them to continue taking knockouts while avoiding hitting into Terapagos with the Crown Opal attack. I'd have to actually play that matchup a little bit more to see if it's worthwhile. I do think that the best use for Terapagos is just the Unified Beatdown attack, and my favorite ways to play Terapagos, just play double turbo energy and don't bother with Crown Opal. I think there's too many ways to play around Crown Opal with Boss's Orders, Prime Catcher, and Iron Bundle in standard format, with most big basic decks like Miraidon and Raging Bolt really taking advantage of all of those options. I mean, some Miraidon decks are playing 4 copies of Boss's Orders. There really is a ton of Gust in standard. So I don't really love that kind of wall attack, especially since it doesn't do enough damage to knock out basic Pokemon EX like Miraidon or Raging Bolt. Unified Beatdown, though, is a great low-to-the-ground attack that could be the backbone of many successful strategies. Oh yeah, and if you do want to accelerate basic energy to your Terapagos EX, you could do that very easily with the amazing new Glass Trumpet item card, which you can only play if you have a Terra Pokemon in play. You get to choose up to 2 of your bench colorless Pokemon and attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to each of them. That's right, this card is like a double dark patch for basic colorless Pokemon that you can only play if you have a Terra Pokemon in play. And again, Terra Pokemon in play, very easy condition to satisfy considering there are basic Terra Pokemon like Terapagos EX. So if you do plan on playing a basic energy version of Terapagos, Glass Trumpet is going to be your best friend. Glass Trumpet is also good for powering up Terapagos EX in other decks, like if you happen to be playing a Palkia VSTAR deck. Origin Form Palkia VSTAR is a card that has been gaining a little bit more hype with the introduction of the Area Zero Underdepths Stadium. Palkia has the Subspace Swell attack, which costs 2 water energy and does 60 damage plus 20 more damage for each bench Pokemon in play, counting both yours and your opponent's. So if you have a bench full of 8 Pokemon and your opponent has a bench full of 8 Pokemon, then you could do 380 damage for just 2 water energy. That's all well and good, and your opponent may do you some favors by benching a ton of Pokemon for you, but many opponents are not going to do that, and I don't think that Origin Form Palkia VSTAR is really going to live up to the hype that it's getting before the set release. I think that Regidrago VSTAR will continue to be the premier VSTAR deck in standard format, and I don't think that Origin Form Palkia VSTAR does anything that Regidrago VSTAR or Raging Bolt doesn't already do better. Origin Form Palkia VSTAR can power up Radiant Greninja, but Regidrago VSTAR has access to Kyurem and actually a better spread attack than Radiant Greninja does. Sure, Origin Form Palkia VSTAR can take big one-hit KOs if both benches are full enough, but Regidrago VSTAR and Raging Bolt EX can both take big one-hit KOs regardless of how big each bench is. I think that Palkia VSTAR will be okay, and certainly it gets better than it was with the introduction of the Area Zero Underdepths Stadium, but I think for the most part, you're probably going to be doing about 280 to 300 damage with Subspace Swell, and the major problem with Origin Form Palkia VSTAR decks is that they're not attacking on the first turn of the game. The earliest you can attack is the second turn of the game, and you have to evolve a Pokemon in play in order to do that. And like I've kind of alluded to throughout this video so far, the pace of standard format is extremely fast and aggressive, and if you're going to go through the trouble of evolving a Pokemon into play, it's got to do something totally game-breaking to be worth it. And I just don't think that Palkia VSTAR's vanilla damage output is game-breaking enough to warrant having to wait a turn to evolve it into play while having all of your vulnerable Palkia V just laying out there for more aggressive decks like Miraidon or Raging Bolt or Roaring Moon to be able to knock out and initiate the prize trade with. Stellar Crown also includes 3 SPEC cards. Sparkling Crystal is a Pokemon Tool SPEC, which makes it so that the attack cost of the Terra Pokemon this card is attached to is reduced by 1 of any type of energy. My buddy Jesse has been making the joke that Sparkling Crystal was printed just to make Dragapult EX playable. And you know what? It kind of is doing that. Dragapult EX has been seeing a little bit of a resurgence in Japan, and Sparkling Crystal is definitely to thank. Being able to use Arven to easily attack with Dragapult EX is a godsend for that deck and makes it so that you can more easily launch Phantom Dive on the second turn of the game. Sparkling Crystal can be used with any Terra Pokemon though, which makes it a very versatile card. Reducing attack costs is quite good, and there's no rule on the card saying that you can't put the Sparkling Crystal back into your deck, so if there's a way to recycle Sparkling Crystal, like with Roseanne's backup or something like that, you could use Sparkling Crystal multiple times throughout a single game. Deluxe Bomb is another Pokemon Tool SPEC. This one's a little bit less serious, a little bit more funny, but it's kind of neat. If you pulled Deluxe Bomb in your pre-release kit, you probably destroyed your opponents because this is a very strong limited card to pull. It says if the Pokemon this card's attached to is in the active spot and takes damage from an opponent's attack, you put 12 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. And if you placed any damage counters in this way, you have to discard this card. This is really good against single prize decks. If you happen to be up against a United Wings deck or something like that, you can just knock out your opponent's attacking Pokemon if they hit into your Deluxe Bomb, which is pretty funny and would definitely help you to win the prize trade. But for the most part, I think that Deluxe Bomb will be a C or D tier A-Spec and not really see any play. The final new A-Spec is Great Tree, which has pretty much an entire novel on it. It says, once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a Stage 1 Pokemon that evolves from one of their basic Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. If that Pokemon is now a Stage 1 Pokemon, they search their deck for a Stage 2 Pokemon that evolves from that Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. Then that player shuffles their deck. Basically, what they're trying to say is that if you have a basic Pokemon on your bench that evolves into a Stage 1 Pokemon, and then that Stage 1 Pokemon evolves into a Stage 2 Pokemon, if you have Great Tree in play, you can go instantly evolve that basic Pokemon up to a Stage 2. So if you have a Pidgey on your bench, you can use Great Tree to go evolve it into Pidgeotto and then to Pidgeot EX. This is a really cool way to spring those evolution Pokemon out into play. As I said earlier, it is very difficult to evolve Stage 2 Pokemon into play right now. The pace of the format is extremely fast and not very forgiving. So Great Tree is a nice boost for those evolution-based decks. The thing I don't like about Great Tree is that if you put a Great Tree out to use for yourself, your opponent can use it too. And giving your opponent an A-Spec boost is kind of insane, right? Like, if it's is kind of insane, right? Like allowing your opponent to basically use a second A-Spec because presumably they've got their own A-Spec in their deck. And then if they want to use your Great Tree as well, they also get to use your A-Spec. It's just kind of messed up and I don't really like it. I don't think that it's powerful enough to warrant giving your opponent the option to evolve with Great Tree and essentially giving them two A-Spec effects in their deck, if that makes sense. This card's fine, but you can't use it on the turn you put a Pokemon into play anyway, so you can't like speed evolve Pokemon into play. You still have to wait a turn after you bench a Pokemon like Pidgey, and then the following turn you could Great Tree it up into a Pidgeot. It's neat, but ultimately not great. And here we go with the supporters. First up, we've got Crispin, which allows you to search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards of different types, reveal them, and put one of them into your hand, and then you attach the other energy to one of your Pokemon. So this is an energy accelerating supporter card. I think if we compare Crispin to energy accelerating supporters like Melanie or Raihan from formats past, I don't think Crispin really stacks up. The bonus effect on Crispin is essentially to search your deck for an energy. You get to search your deck for one energy and attach it, and then you search your deck for another energy. A card like Raihan allows you to accelerate an energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon and then search your deck for whatever card you want. And Melanie allows you to accelerate an energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon V and then draw 3 cards. When comparing searching your deck for an energy to searching your deck for whatever card you want or drawing 3 cards, I think Crispin is a little bit weak. A lot of people are high on Crispin right now because of the fact that you could use Crispin to help power up these Terra Pokemon's awkward attack costs. And Crispin may be usable for that, especially in decks that have a way to easily search Crispin out. Like if you're playing Pidgeot EX, a one of Crispin is fine in Pidgeot EX based decks. I expect Dragapult EX decks to probably play a Crispin to help accelerate energy onto Dragapult EX. If you're playing the Noctowl engine, you could also easily search out Crispin to use it on a key turn. But my issue with Crispin is that you have to already be completely set up in order to use the card, which means that its use cases will be pretty narrow and limited to decks that can just search out the one of when they want to use it. I don't really think the idea of including 3 Crispin in your deck and relying on it as the sole energy accelerator from your deck, I don't really see that as being competitively viable. Lacey is a new supporter card that allows you to shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 4 cards. But if your opponent has 3 or fewer prize cards remaining, you get to draw until you have 8 cards instead. Shuffle draw 8 is very good. Shuffle draw 4 is very bad. Half the game your supporter is going to be bad, and half the game your supporter is going to be good. I think this kind of supporter is better in a format like Gym Leader Challenge, where decks are, for the most part, only taking 1 prize at a time, and your Shuffle Draw 8 effect will have more time to be used than in Standard format. In Standard format, decks often win in 3 to 4 turns, which means that you may only have 1 or maybe 2 turns tops where your opponent has 3 or fewer prize cards remaining to actually proc Lacey's Draw 8 effect. And I think that that's just kind of the downside of a card like this. I don't think this support is very good. Briar is a crazy card, and it can only be played if your opponent has exactly 2 prize cards remaining, so it is limited in that way, but its effect is incredibly broken. Until the end of your turn, if your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out by damage from one of your Terra Pokemon's attacks, you get to take a bonus prize card. With Briar, it is very possible to take 3 or even 4 prize turns to close out games. And with the new Noctowl engine or with Pidgeot EX, it is very easy to go search out Briar on a key turn to help you take that bonus prize card. Keep in mind, a lot of the best attackers in Standard format are Terra Pokemon. We've got Dragapult EX, Charizard EX, and the new Terapagos EX, which are all Terra Pokemon and can take advantage of the boost from Briar. Charizard EX decks already play Pidgeot EX, which can go search out Briar for the exact turn that you want to play it. Terapagos EX decks are going to have access to Noctowl and maybe Pidgeot EX to get Briar on the turn that you need it. You can combo Briar with Dusknoir from Shrouded Fable to force your opponent onto the 2 prize turn so that then you can play Briar and then take a game-winning multi-prize knockout. Or you could play Briar and then blow up Dusknoir and then put an opponent's Pokemon within range to take a game-winning multi-prize knockout. This card is very good and will be used in many competitive decks to end games before your opponent has a chance for any counterplay. And that does it for the Stellar Crown set review. Thank you so much for watching the video. If there's any card I talked about that you disagree with my take on, feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.